All right, there we go. Hello, how's it going, everybody? So Zabora is with me. She just had to step away for a second. And Stephanie, you know what? Let me double check. This is probably going to be playing on YouTube. So Zabora there it goes. Yep. Okay. Turn that off.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay. Also, we went live. We're live now.
Yeah, I heard.
Oh, good. So, yeah, so I sent Stephanie the link, so hopefully she'll join us. But if anybody else wants to join us, please let me know. I have to have your email address or be following you on Twitter or on Facebook so I can send you the link, though, because I can't post the link in the chat because then anybody can join in. So we'll just go ahead and get started. And if anybody wants to join in, let me know. Let me just check my Twitter real quick. See if I got any messages. Doesn't look like it. So okay, good. And all right, cool. So yeah, so symbolism. I'll just kind of give my take on it, and then we can go around and talk about it. But symbolism, I think, is there's various. I mean, symbolism is one of those things. It's not exactly hidden, and it's not exactly out in the open. It's just symbolism is something that we associate with something. That's what we call symbolism. So we associate things with images, characters, and we've done that since the dawn of time. I mean, that's how writing began. The earliest forms of writing that we have usually are pictographs, especially Egyptian writing is pictographs. Chinese characters are definitely pictographs. And each one of those things represents something, and then if it's depicted with something else, it changes its meaning and it can become very complex. But on its own, by itself, symbolism doesn't have any meaning because anything could be used as a symbol. That's one of the reasons why when I use a tarot, and I don't use the tarot that much, but I always use the Rider-Waite tarot because it's symbolism that I'm familiar with. It's symbolism that resonates in me, and it's all of it is symbolism that goes back into the occult tradition. So it's really funny sometimes, Zabora, whenever I hear people talking about occult symbolism in media or Hollywood. It's like
It's always like a triangle or a circle, which I guess are basic shapes, so everything's Illuminati.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's always a triangle. A triangle automatically means Illuminati or whatever. And it's like, there's a reason why advertisements use certain colors, because those colors are associated with we associate on a primal level, maybe even the subconscious level, we associate certain colors with certain things. And then depending upon the culture you're in, different colors can have meanings. But in our culture, usually the Western culture, the colors that they will use, like if they use a lot of reds and a lot of fiery colors, that gives a certain feel to something, as opposed to like using blue light or whatever, which are the most two common lights that they use in theatrics. So yeah, a lot of symbolism does have meaning, but it doesn't mean that it's going to, completely enthrall someone to go out and, I don't know, worship Satan. What are your thoughts on it, Zabora?
Well, I agree. Symbols are a way we communicate, whether it be subtle or in your face. Because like if you and I were witches and we see a pentacle, that means a very specific thing to both of us. That does not mean the same thing to somebody else who sees it. So it was almost like a secret hidden symbol that we understand. So symbology, I don't know, it's very important in my practice. and it's something that I kind of rely heavily on, especially because I do a lot of sympathetic type magic. So for me, symbology is extremely important.
Mhm. Now, the symbology that you use, are these pretty much established symbols, or do you create your own, or how? I know we can't get into every single thing, but I mean, if you were like going to put, I don't know, I mean, do you put more importance on, say, your own symbolism or using pre-existing symbols?
So actually, I kind of lean more towards the traditionalist. So I kind of like established symbols because it's not just an understanding that I have, it's an understanding that most people have. So for me, it kind of carries more weight because there's more energy behind the symbol. But I do a lot of my own sigil work and runes and stuff like that, or combination type workings where I create my own symbols and I use them in my own way. So it's a little bit of both. It just kind of depends on what kind of working I'm doing or what I'm using the symbol for. If I'm trying to illustrate life, I may hold up an ankh,
Mhm.
but I may also convert the ankh into a sigil in itself using a different technique from another culture. So it really just depends on how I feel at that moment, but I usually go with traditional symbology.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And also, I would assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume that you probably also have, like you mentioned, the Ankh, and how that can have deeper meanings to other people who share your same symbolism or maybe your same path. And I think it's definitely the same thing with the pentacle and witches, like you had mentioned. But it doesn't mean that every single star, like the stars on Hollywood Boulevard, or it doesn't mean that every single five-pointed star or pentacle out there is associated with witchcraft.
Of
You know.
course, it comes down to the people that you're talking to
Mhm.
and the message you're associating with that symbol. Um, I may see a pentagon or something and be like, "Oh, that means this to me," not necessarily what you would see in that image. So it really just depends on the individual discussing the symbol or using the symbol.
Yeah, definitely, and also symbols can have deeper meanings to people, to individuals, because they can place importance on it, or they place an importance on it over others. And when I say importance, what I mean is I'm talking about it has a meaning, it has something deeper to it. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily scale of importance over something else. It's just that that particular symbol to a certain path or a certain culture will have a deeper meaning to them than, like, let's say, somebody who's familiar with that symbol but doesn't place so much importance on it. That's what I was trying to describe. And also the pentacle, or the pentagram, I always get those two words confused, but it has it has deeper meanings than just witchcraft, which I think it's gotten associated with for the most part today, which is okay. I don't mind that. But the history of the pentagram is very fascinating. It goes way back. The earliest usage that I know of is in the Pythagorean school, where that was used as a symbol of his, supposedly, in his teachings, and also him to explain mathematics. He believed that mathematics was essentially the fabric of reality, and so it has a lot of deeper meanings to various people.
Yeah, before that, the Egyptians had a pentacle, but it literally was just the stars of the sky.
Mm, And what and is that what it meant to them?
Yeah, they actually have reliefs and stuff in tomb walls when they're depicting certain gods, like Nut, who's a sky goddess.
Hmm.
Her body is blue, and inside her body there are pentacles representing the stars because she's the sky goddess.
Hmm.
Multiple stelas to pharaohs in tombs and in the pyramids all depict stars in or pentacles in the form of stars. So it's it just depends on whatever culture you're going with, I guess.
Hmm.
Like you said, each culture is going to have their own meaning, and it may differ from culture to culture.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely, exactly. And yeah, here you go. Here's a good example. Well, this is kind of more of a modern spin on it. But for example, what we call the swastika, or what the Germans call the swastika, in Asian cultures, that's not associated with anything negative. That's not associated with Nazis or anything. It's just, I believe it's a symbol. It's a representation of just the eternity and spinning of life, which essentially was what the original that version of the swastika meant to the Germanic people. It was also a sun symbol.
Yeah, I've heard that it was actually originally a sun symbol or associated with Buddha or something like that, but I don't know what the origins of it is.
Hmm. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it goes back so far that it's difficult to really understand exactly what it meant. Um, we also have unfortunately lost a lot of understanding of our symbolism. I believe that, like you look at, for example, a lot of the 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 images that we have today of pre-Christian deities. A lot of them have animals or ways that they sit or certain objects that they hold, and all of those things had meaning. And chances are, I'm projecting here, but I'm assuming that a lot of those symbols had other deeper meanings. Like we look up at, for example, we look up at the an image of the birth of our nation or something, and we might see certain things like a scroll or a flag or a cannon or something. And if somebody else saw that, they wouldn't exactly understand that, and they would try to put it together. And so, oh, so this is a god of cannons and writing, But that's not what it meant. It was each one of those things represented, say, freedom and all these various things, because these are the symbols that we have given meaning to. But once you lose the understanding of the meaning of that symbol, it's essentially it makes it. I hate to use the term, but it makes it inert. It makes it inert and shit. What's the term I'm looking for? Shit, impotent. Makes it inert and impotent, which is unfortunate, but that's sometimes that happens with symbols.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And everybody's got their own bias on uh everything. So some symbols are no different. It's kind of um like when what's his face? Joseph Smith? No, not was that the Mormon dude?
Mhm. Yeah, Joseph Smith. Yeah.
Okay. He looked at scrolls of ancient Egypt of mummification rituals, and he made this whole story about how it's actually Abraham being offered up as a sacrifice. So we definitely have our own bias in even in when we're interpreting symbols that are familiar to us. You have crazy people running around going, "Oh, Pizzagate," and "Oh, it's a circle, therefore boys," or whatever. So I don't know. It gets a little complicated.
Hmm. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that, yeah, and then people can use. I mean, what often happens on the detractors that I do video responses to is what they do is they will take the symbols and they will immediately disparage them and create negative associations with them. They always like to do that with especially the pentagram, um, any various thing, and they always want to associate it with negativity or try to paint it in such a light. But it's really funny when you start getting into some of these crazy conspiracy nuts, because what they like to do is tie various things together, and they force associations, and it's really fascinating to kind of unravel it and understand how they came to some of the conclusions that they came to. But it really helps to understand how uh, they can mischaracterize symbols, and because they've mischaracterized one symbol, it's easy for them to associate something else with it and then mischaracterize that. And by the end of it, they've completely woven this narrative, which is based in bullshit. That's why Bill Schnoebelen and David Carrico and some of the other ones who are better at disparaging pagans and occultists and witches and Satanists and everyone else is they've read, they have a little bit of the information, and then they take that and they twist it for their own good, so that they can sit there and say, like, mostly what David Carrico does is he just takes text out of context and then slaps them in with other people's text.
Yeah, and that's kind of what people like that are relying on, is that you're not going to fact check them.
Yeah.
But this happens even when you're not out to destroy another person, when you're actually out to try to understand them. Archaeologists did this. There's the guy who discovered the scroll of Ani, the Book of the Dead, the Papyrus of Ani. Budge, he actually, being a Christian in the 1900s, had very, very much bias uh, views that worked his way into his writings, including about homosexuality, which the Egyptians really didn't have any stance against that I've been able to find. So even people that are out to, elevate or discover something about a culture often will misstrued what the originals were supposed to be saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think that was pretty much spurred on by I think it was entirely based in religion, and then then it seeped into the culture, and started seeping into our social interactions. But yeah, like the Greeks and the Romans and even the Hindus, were homosexuality was known. I mean, it wasn't unusual. It was just the norm. That's why it was so funny when I was talking with the Call for an Uprising, because he kept talking about normal, and I was like, what? That is normal. What the hell are you talking about? You know?
If it's occurred in nature, it's normal.
And we've had it for a millennia. Sure, some archaeologists try to kind of cover up some frescoes, or not, like, don't pay attention to this fresco over here. But there were a lot of, especially I think it was in Pompeii, where they found a lot of, I don't know, the best terms for it is sex rooms, where they had images of people copulating in various positions. And sometimes they were men on men, sometimes it was men on women, sometimes it was two men and one woman. It was, and also, unfortunately, are also into other forms of sexuality, which today we definitely have definitely frowned on, and I believe that there's good reason that we frown on it, because
Yeah, wasn't there also like bestiality and
exactly,
children and stuff like that? Yeah.
exactly.
I think I saw this in a movie, but I'm not sure. But wasn't it like Greek philosophy that women were for procreation and boys were for pleasure?
I don't know who said that.
I don't know either. I'm saying I think it might be from a movie. I just
Oh,
remember that coming to the surface for some reason.
I know that. Oh shit, I can't remember exactly who it was. If it was Plato or Aristotle, but I think I might have this wrong, so if somebody in chat knows, please correct me. But I know there was one philosopher who was interested in, people, younger people. This is a topic that I don't really want to talk about on my channel. That's why I'm dancing around it very uncomfortably. But yes, there was. I think there was one philosopher that was supposedly that way. But yeah, I don't know if it was. I don't think it was. I think it was just. I don't know if that was norm. You know what I mean? I don't know exactly how they viewed activities like that back
You've
in the
also got
past.
Yeah, you've also got propaganda and everything else, so it's really hard to say what anything would be without a time machine.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, but we definitely know that homosexuality was, it was the norm. It was, and it still is. It is still the norm. It's not. It's not an unusual activity, or it's been around for thousands of years. It's just socially, especially in the West, it's been suppressed and categorized as other, and it's not. So anyhow, that is how did we get onto that topic?
Symbology.
Yeah, I know, right? But how exactly did we go? Well, I don't know exactly how we got on it, but let's get back onto the topic of symbolism or symbology. I
That was
call
my
it
fault.
symbolism, but I guess symbology is good enough.
Yeah, I think I actually symbology would be like the study of symbols, so I think I'm actually using the term wrong.
Mm. No, I mean it's kind of like what we're talking about, so it's not way off.
Yeah, it's sort of on topic this time.
Yeah, right, exactly. We're a change.
That was my fault. I talked about Budge and his biases.
You talk about Butch?
Budge, that was the guy who found the papyrus of Ani. That's how we got
Ah,
on the homosexual topic.
oh, okay. I see. I see. That's how we got onto it. Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. The Rosetta Stone, because it was a way for them to crack the code and actually be able to decipher the Egyptian language, which was amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I told you. It was between the French and the British, and it was kind of their modern day space race. They were
Hmm.
kind of trying to be the first to crack the language of the Egyptians. And it was
Hmm.
actually a combination of both of them that led to the great understanding we have today.
And I think there's a couple of archaeologists in South America and Central America who've been cracking the code of the Aztecs. I don't know if it's completely done yet, but
Yeah, I don't think there's any like ancient dead language that'll ever be truly fully translated, at least not in my lifetime, because there's much of um the hieroglyphs we just don't have words for. We just don't know what they mean.
mm,
We're like, okay, well, we think like ingredients for kapet, which is Egyptian incense, also called kifi, but kifi would be like the Greek word. There's sweet rushes, and that's kind of the best translation we have for that, but we don't know what the sweet rushes would have been. Would
mhm,
it be lemongrass, because they definitely had that? Would have been some kind of fragrant other grass that they had? Would it have been like cattails or something that would have been fragrant to them? We don't know. So yeah, there's that.
so yeah. So that term probably refers to a specific thing, which they just don't know what that specific thing is.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't think they'll ever crack the language in our lifetime, but it's fascinating to watch them uncover these things.
Hmm.
Because I know that there's the Aztecs, their writing was so complicated because it was like similar to the Egyptians. This could mean cat, but it could also mean attack, but it could also mean, warning.
Hmm.
So depending on the symbols around it. So jaguar, monkey, bear means this message, but jaguar, monkey, bear, fish means this message.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. And so that's why it's really difficult there's no way to decipher symbolism unless you understand what the meaning is. So,
Yeah, exactly. You really have to kind of immerse yourself a little bit within the culture to pick up on their understanding.
and I know every so often people get this idea, like they'll create a sigil for something. Somebody will create a sigil for something. They'll put it out on social media, like, and then they tell people, okay, well, this is what this symbol means. But the way I view that is it's like taking to me it's inert and it is impotent. It has nothing behind it, because what you're doing is you're putting something out there that people are supposed to associate with something, but it doesn't have any meaning to the individual. They almost have to build and sort of create meaning into it. And I think this is one of the unfortunate things of people randomly just like, okay, well, everything's a sigil. No. Not everything is a sigil. There's actually, if you want to do it in the Western occult tradition, there's a specific way that you make the sigil, and that has a meaning to it. If you just kind of have random lines interconnecting and all that, it looks interesting, but you're going to have to tell people what it means.
Right. And then the people that you're telling have to accept that meaning and not imply their own meanings upon the symbol. That's why I kind of agree with you about the inert thing, because you, being a friend of mine, can give me a sigil you've created that is a traditional created sigil and tell me it means health, wealth, and good luck in your life, okay? But that would have to be something that I would accept based on our friendship, of course. But I could easily go, that's an attack. You're attacking me. So there has to be some kind of an acceptance upon the listener's part to believe. I don't know. It's kind of like the sigils being everywhere. It's like when people look up the clouds, like, oh my God, is that a dragon? Is there a dragon fairy talking to me right now? This is a message. It's like, motherfucker, it's a cloud. My husband even did this, so I'm not like knocking on anybody. I love him dearly, but he kept going, baby, there's ravens everywhere. They're following me. And I was like, okay, you have shiny things on your head. And he didn't believe me that they were after his watch and sunglasses until they tried to steal his sunglasses off of his head. I'm like, now you know why the birds are following you. You have shiny things.
Exactly, and I think they're associated with theft. There's certain birds that are associated with theft because they like to steal things. Magpies, I think, are the ones that are associated with that.
Yeah, I think he kept going, are ravens related to Anubis? Is this Anubis telling me a message? I'm like, no, they're probably trying to steal your shit. You wear a bunch of shiny jewelry outside, they're gonna notice.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And that kind of brings up another point, is that how we put meanings on certain things. Oh, now Stephanie shows up.
Oh, good. Now I can stop talking.
No, she's in the chat. Yeah, Stephanie, I sent you the link on Facebook. So if you want to join in, you're more than welcome. Also, somebody else had sent me, there was one other person in the chat. Let's see, who was it? I think it was Apollo Nabets. I didn't get a friend request from you, but if you want to send me a friend request, and I can send you the link. Yes, definitely. You're more than welcome to come in. I'm still going to be going for probably another hour and a half. I'm gonna do it for a 2-hour stream. That's what I like to do. Anything longer than 2 hours for me it gets a little taxing.
Well, at the 2-hour mark, we usually run out of topics anyway.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yep.
At the end of the 2-hour marks, we're usually just bashing on Christians. My fault. I do it.
Or I'll drag us into some kind of a political conversation.
So you want to talk politics now?
Yeah, we'll I don't know. We'll let the conversation sort of go free flow. But I think symbolism. I mean, there's the good thing about a topic like this is there's so much to unpack. You know what I mean? There's just so much there. You really can't run out of stuff to talk about.
No, that's true, and it's kind of like you were bringing up earlier with the tarot.
Hmm.
But the way you interpret it is very specific and traditional,
Hmm.
because those meanings, like the two pillars of the high priestess and her shield, that all has specific imagery and meaning behind it. But if somebody who's very new to tarot understood none of that, they're going to imply their own meanings, they're going to have their own interpretations, and those symbols will mean specific things for them that don't mean them for someone traditionally trained.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just, you know, how it's just a way that or I shouldn't say that. The symbolism that you use, other people understand, and they can then understand exactly what that symbolism is. If you had like, for example, people call them oracle cards or oracle decks. If somebody has an oracle deck and somebody else like picks up the oracle deck and tries to use it, they're probably going to put their own interpretation into the oracle deck, which that's not necessarily right or wrong, but it's whatever you associate with that oracle deck is going to be different from someone else and what they associate with that particular image. Like, let's say an image of an owl or a wolf or a raven or a fish or whatever. So, and nothing wrong with that. It's just something to be aware of. Hey, how's it going, Stephanie?
I can't hear anything.
Can you hear us?
I'm having a hard time hearing her.
Yeah, she sounded a little quiet. Can you hear us, Stephanie? Oh, yeah, she looks like she's having some problems. But yeah, so yeah, because especially in, for example, the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot, which I think people should. I'm trying to train myself to say it, because it used to be called just the Rider-Waite deck.
Yeah, but isn't Smith like the artist or something? Didn't
Right,
she do the
exactly.
artistry?
Yeah, Pamela. Yeah, because Pamela Cole Smith was the artist who created it. So
Right.
yeah.
And then they were all familiar with oh god, what is it? It was written. I keep thinking Masons for some reason, but that's not it. The Order of the Golden Dawn, wasn't
Mhm.
that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, because she was a member of the Golden Dawn, and I don't know. I mean, it's really funny because people associate it with Waite, but really just all that Waite did was just I think he commissioned her. So, but the symbolism is what she came up. Waite didn't come up with it, but obviously the symbolism that she came up with was based in Golden Dawn tradition. And a lot of the symbolism that the Golden Dawn use, yes, is reflected in Freemasonry too. But Freemasonry itself is not it's not a religion. It's a I always called it a like a men's group. It's basically just a fraternal organization. But a lot of Freemason groups accept women. It's not
Well,
just Freemasonry.
yeah, they do. There are some lodges that have female Masons, and then
Mhm.
there's some lodges that just have the Sisters of the Morning Star or whatever the fuck it's called. Um, my grandfather was invited by his uncle into a lodge, and I think he basically said just like you did. It's basically a men's club
Mhm.
where they they discuss the business at hand and keeping the lodge running, and then whatever else it is. But I'm pretty sure it's just a gentleman's club for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. And they just, everything is kind of a symbolic ritual to them. Won't let me do it, so I guess I was meant to be. Thank you for the invite. Oh, okay, no problem. Sorry that you couldn't join us. I'm locked out of my Facebook. Oh, okay. Well, somebody got locked out of their ritual. Yeah, somebody got locked out of their Facebook.
Locked out of a
Yeah.
ritual?
So
I've never seen that.
yeah, that's what she did. She said she locked out her Facebook.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, that does suck. Yeah, I don't know what the hell these tech companies are doing, but they're insane at this point. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, you were talking about this earlier. There's definitely seems to be a bias towards one political side, but that's just what I've noticed.
Yeah, I mean it's obvious now. Before it was kind of like people were like, "Oh, that's a crazy conspiracy theory," and it's like, well, it's not. It's not a crazy conspiracy theory. It's true. They're definitely biased. And if they want to be hard line on their rules, that's fine. But treat everybody equally. So if Joe Schmo over here calls for violence against other people, ban them. I don't care why or what political group they're associated with. They're calling for violence. That's that's hate speech. That should be taken off the platform. But they allow it to be there. It's absolutely, it's disgusting is what it is, because you're rubber stamping, you're allowing, you're condoning that activity, and I
Yeah, it
don't
sets a
know how they
precedent.
justify it.
It sets a precedent for every other social media site out there. Oh, we don't like what you have to say because it hurt my feelings, therefore banned.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So yeah, but anyhow, we'll try to stay on topic.
Yeah, let's not get political.
We'll actually try to stay on topic for once. But yeah. So so the tarot that Pamela Cole Smith drew is, I think it's filled with a lot of symbolism. And the good thing about it is, if you understand the Western occult tradition, a lot of the symbolism is it will resonate with you. You will understand. You go, oh yeah, because that's associated with this, and you'll understand the meaning to it. And that helps to access our subconscious, and also, like Jung had talked about, the greater consciousness, the universal consciousness. And that's one of the unfortunate things, I think, that some people may lose access to by using oracle cards. And it's nothing wrong with oracle cards, but you kind of miss that. You would kind of miss that connection with maybe a greater base of people who understand certain sets of symbolism. Those people who use that particular oracle deck would have commonality in the symbolism, and they would, so you would have commonality in that way. But
Yeah,
it would be interesting. Have you ever used an oracle deck?
I actually own a few of them.
Okay.
So the one that I always really liked is actually a giant cultural appropriation cash grab. At least from my understanding now, but I still really like the symbology and the meanings that they've applied to the cards.
Is that
So,
is that what it's actually called, or is that what you call it?
oh, it's the medicine cards. I think is what it's called by David Carson,
Mhm.
and it was one other person, but I think they're just called medicine cards. But from my understanding, they don't give any kind of indication what tribes, Native American tribes, are pulling from. They're just kind of blanketing this as all Native people put this symbology on these animals, and that's what the book's about. But for me, I kind of understand what you're saying with the oracle cards kind of losing their symbology because it's not a popular thing. And although individual decks can become popular among a group of people or a group of practitioners, the tarot holds a lot more weight because there's a lot more history behind it, at least in my opinion. And this could be due to the way that I even interpret gods and things of that nature and traditions. It just seems to have more oomph behind it when I use certain imageries or certain rituals, because thousands of people before me have also attributed this kind of energy to a symbol or a ritual or whatever else. So it just seems more powerful to me.
Mhm. Yeah, 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 exactly. And I agree. Yeah, because I think I know which deck you're talking about. And I remember when these were when like and I don't mean this in a negative form if anybody identifies this way, but when the New Age movement really started to kind of creep into witchcraft and paganism, I noticed a lot of these, oracle decks and animal totem cards and all this stuff. And it was not like I saw that and it was like, it was just, it didn't resonate with me. I didn't feel any connection with it whatsoever because it wasn't part of my culture. And it seemed like other people were it was a way to, be accepting and being hip, to do these things, to have a dream catcher and have a wolf totem or whatever. And to me, it never resonated with me because I never felt any kind of a connection with it. So I never got into those things. But I've been curious about like what people get out of using those particular animal cards or whatever it is, or I
Well,
don't
for
know what
me,
they get out of it.
I'm like a huge animal lover,
Mhm.
and I've actually studied different species for different high school projects.
Mhm.
So like when they talk about the dog being loyal, well, it's like, of course, that's something everybody applies to a dog. They're man's best friend. They're a loyal animal. But the wolf being like teacher, that's not necessarily something that everyone would attribute to wolf based on its characteristics as an actual animal.
Mhm.
So for me, originally it was just the symbology of the animals. That's what kind of subconsciously kind of made me grab at it because being a huge animal lover. It then became my conscious part of accepting this symbolism to mean certain things when I would do a reading.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think there has to be some kind of, I don't know if like consciousness or unconscious, subconscious kind of acceptance of the message. You have to accept that message for what they tell you it is versus implying your own meanings. But then again, I know people who read intuitively and never have picked up a tarot book, but they've been able to give excellent readings to me. It's
Mhm.
like, yeah, that's spot on. That's definitely something I identify with. Something I was hoping that came up didn't come up. Something I didn't see coming up came up. So I
Well,
don't know.
hold on a second, Zipporah, before you get too far into that. What do you mean by intuitive? Like they pick up the cards and they just kind of like whatever sort of comes to their mind, their intuition, they just say, and it doesn't necessarily really depend upon what the cards are.
Yeah,
Okay.
one reading that I had before even looking at a card, the reader put their hand over the card and just said, "This is the way I feel about this card. This is the images that are coming to my mind when I touch this card." And then they flip the card over and they're like, "Okay, so does this make sense to you? Because this is what I'm receiving from the cards." And that's similar to kind of how even I read tarot, although I don't intuitively really read them. Occasionally, I may see like a symbol that is unique to a specific artist, an artist rendering, and go, "Oh, that's sticking out to me for some reason. Does this kind of image bring anything up to you, or does this mean anything to you?" So, again, there has to be some kind of an acceptance upon the both parties for the symbology of something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I agree. Hey, how's it going, Leon?
Oh, Leon, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm kind of running around doing last minute fix up before I block up. I'm done. Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry. So what? It's all the symbolism, right?
Yeah, yeah. I just wanted to acknowledge that you came into the chat and just say hello. And I don't know when you got here and how much you've heard so far.
Not much. My friend was over here, so I thought I'd pop in as soon as he left, and he just went home.
Okay.
So, can you kind of give me a filler of what was discussed?
Yeah, we were just talking about symbolism, and then we got talking about the tarot and the symbolism of the tarot, and then the versus, say, the symbolism that an oracle deck would use. And then the question that I brought up was what, like for myself, I understand when I use a tarot deck that when I look at the cards, I understand all the symbolism in the card, and I understand where it relates to, and I can tie things together and expand on it, because there's other meanings in there that I can expand on. Is the best way to describe it. But for example, if I used an oracle deck, like if somebody gave me an oracle deck and I didn't have like the little booklet that comes with it, and I was looking at the cards, I would put meaning into cards that I would end up putting my own meaning into the cards, not necessarily a universal consciousness or a universal acceptance of what those particular cards meant. And so I was just wondering, like if Zabora had any experience with that, or what she thought about that. And she was talking about how some people are very intuitive, and so they sort of, even maybe without even looking at the cards, they kind of already have an idea of, what advice to give her, or what is coming to their mind about the particular situation or question that
I actually have a bit of a me and these songs on our last talk. As someone who almost exclusively uses tarot for witchcraft, even as someone like I said to Sephora and the message I sent her, I use the Golden Tarot Visconti Sephora deck. Now, these cards, as you may know, don't have the label like most of the modern tarot do. So, like, today, I was going through my cards. Like, the first card I drew was the King of Cups. I looked at it and went, the image, the person, I could have sworn was a queen. Looked at the book with that, that's a king. So maybe I'm spoiled on the more modern tarot decks. It has to tell me like, oh, it's the Six of Swords, it's the Six of whatever, or it's just the Tower or whatever. Do you think more witches should use non-labeled cards like these Visconti Sephora, or should they stick with more the labeled tarot cards? Like the what's it called? The Rider-Waite type deck.
Well, if you have the one that I'm thinking of, it's the one that I have, and it's actually based on the Rider-Waite deck. Are you talking about the ones by Cairo, or whatever his name is? He's basically got a lot of mechanical images and stuff like that on his cards, and on the back there's a steampunk type sun thing with a blue. Those are the cards.
That's actually my main deck.
Okay, so yeah, it is the Gilded Tarot. Yeah, those are Rider-Waite Smith inspired. That is a Rider-Waite Smith inspired deck. The other decks that you have are like the Leonard Nimoy ones. Oh God, I'm pretty sure I just said an actor's name. Pretty sure I just got a Spock.
The ones I'm holding right now, it's the Golden Tarot Visconti Sephora deck. These cards are actually a very medieval type. These have a lot of like the Three of Swords, which is upside down. Has forgive me, I'm gonna push the hell out of it. A bomb, drop vault, writing on it, like it uses language like knave, knights, queen, king. They don't call them cups, chalice, pentacles. They call them coins in the
Oh, well, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Whether you call it a disc or a paten, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
yeah, and there's so many decks out there that are based on that symbolism by the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. But the artists obviously they put their own spin on it depending upon what it is. Like, you know, there's cat tarot, and you know, moon tarot, and Merlin tarot, and Celtic tarot, and all these various tarots, which often, for the most part, are based on that universal symbolism that most people or I shouldn't say most people, but I mean that most decks they all source the same basic symbolism, which is nice because that means, like, if I go into a store and I see a deck and I like that deck, chances are I can look at it and, you know, because I know what the devil means and I know what the two of cups mean, and I knew even if they use, you know, the chalice or a cauldron or whatever as a representation for the cup, I know what it means. So it's easy for me to use that tarot deck as opposed to, like, let's say, an oracle deck, which is completely different symbolism. I wouldn't understand it.
I actually have right here an oracle deck called Art Through the Eyes of the Soul Oracle.
Mm-hmm.
I look through it and I'm like, the fuck is this?
Well, it's
My
a new
brain
system.
short-circuited completely. I'm sorry, Deborah, what?
It's a new system you have to learn. It's not going to match up to the tarot because it doesn't rely on tarot symbolism. The Nemoid deck that I was kind of bringing up sort of relies on tarot symbolism, but it's a deck that's been cut down from like the 78 cards to like 25 cards or whatever it is. I'm not
just
comfortable.
So it's a major arcana, basically.
I'm not sure. I've not used any of that style of deck. I'm not familiar with it. I've always really loved the Rider-Waite-Smith type decks. Those are the ones that I learned on. But I have many decks with many different types of symbols on them. I've got Shadowscape Tarot. I've got Gilded Tarot. I've got Dragon Tarot. But like Lay Loken was saying, despite the artistic differences, the symbology in each of those cards is still the same.
I do have a question, though. I've been told by a witchy teacher that everyone in this sometimes in life a suit will jump out at them. And for me, it's the sword. They have been following me through a lot of my readings. Like, I shuffle the deck very well, separate the cards, rejoin the cards, and no matter what, the swords follow me. I'm concerned, to be perfectly honest with you.
Well, it kind of depends upon what, I mean, okay, so like if somebody's doing a tarot reading for you and, like, let's say swords keeps coming up, they may emphasize the swords for a certain reason. It may be in that particular reading that swords are coming up. It could, yes, it could also represent, like, let's say, depending upon, again, if you associate swords with air or fire, it may mean that either you need to maybe focus on the intellectual approach to a particular problem, or maybe that you need to, you know, get energetic and do something and focus, you know, and you know, energize the situation, or get, you know, you need to do something to change the situation. So it really depends. If during the reading, if the particular person or yourself feels that certain cards are important over other ones, there's a reason for it. Either subconsciously or consciously, you're aware of something, or you're becoming aware of something, or maybe something is being revealed to either you or the person who's doing the reading. I mean, I don't believe that people who go for a quote unquote reading, I don't believe it's a passive activity. I think it's an interactive activity. You both are there. You're both addressing a problem. You're both coming to a solution to figure out something. And I think that both people should be participating in it, you know. Like if somebody does a reading and they say, okay, well, this comes up, this means this means that, and this means that, and they just tell you exactly what it is. I mean, I don't know. If that's a reading that appeals to you, I guess so. But to me, I don't see it as a passive activity. I think that it's an interactive activity.
Most of my tarot sessions usually turn into a therapy session. Like I could very easily tell you what these cards are telling me, but when I tell you, it's up to you to put emphasis on the reading and what I'm telling you. I had a client who came to me with a situation with his wife, and I was like, yeah, I'm not seeing anything about a wife, but I do see a dark-haired woman slandering you. And he's like, oh my God, this woman, she's been attacking me at my kids' preschool, and you're telling me that the cards want me to focus on this. I'm like, I can't tell you what the cards want. I can only tell you what they're saying. You know, I can only give you information that I'm given. So again, it depends on the person receiving the reading putting their own emphasis on their symbols.
Yeah, and sometimes, like most people who aren't familiar with the tarot deck, you know, they'll see certain cards come up, and you know, it might concern them. Like obviously, death. The death card comes up. Somebody might get kind of alarmed, like, "Oh, what does that mean?" You know, and they'll focus in on the card, and it'll be a little bit of a concern. And usually, the person doing the reading has to kind of, you know, give a little context to it and explain what it can mean. It can mean, you know, change. It can mean, you know, depending upon what other cards are near it, it can shape the meaning. It doesn't necessarily mean that death is going to occur or something awful is going to happen. It's not a negative prediction. But some people, they don't understand. They don't have another association with death. And so that's immediately comes to their mind, you know, is a negative.
Yeah, most definitely. I've seen that in tarot readings where people are like, are you telling me my son's going to die? And then they're like, no. There's just going to be a great change in your relationship with your child. And then the child goes to prison for 25 years.
Yep. And I don't know if you mentioned this, Leon. You said something about how you were told that certain suits of the cards are associated with certain people depending upon which time of life they're in? Or did I get that wrong? And you're muted.
Leon, you muted yourself. Okay.
Sorry, I was chewing gum. I didn't want to come up on chat. No, I said certain suits have been following me throughout my life. Again, swords being one of them. Swords being the fact of logic and air, and the fact that I'm earth aligned and rather pursue logic as I guess, is a way of life for me. I guess it's only reasonable that swords would come up and say, "Hey, this is a part of you," and so forth. And for the longest time, the Tower card has frightened me the most. And it sounds like the happiest of cards.
Mm-hmm.
Not exactly the lovers, but I had a Tower card in one of my readings, and the reader laid it on pretty thick on what the Tower meant, and I've been for the longest time. I'm like, yeah, I don't want that card ever again, no matter what it means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the experience. Well, there was a way that I read about how you associate. There's different ways you can associate different types of the tarot. You can associate, like sometimes you can use either what do they call it? A king, queen, prince or princess, forget exactly, Knight Squires, I forget exactly what it is, but I think there's like 4 levels to them. And you can use those to represent different times of a person's life, like a young person with blonde hair or an older person with dark hair, whatever, depending upon if it's a Knight of Cups or a Knight of Swords or a Knight of Pentacles or whatever. I've heard that sometimes people will use a card to represent the person. Like, let's say if they're doing a Celtic cross reading, sometimes they'll put a card down to represent the person, and usually that is one of the court cards. I've heard that used before, and you can associate certain suits with certain times of the year, certain age times, and also certain elements. So yeah, I mean, that's what I mean by there's so much symbolism there. If you want to draw upon it or call it in or use it, there's so much that you can see, even if you just do like a simple tarot reading for someone. Depending upon how deep you want to go, there's a lot of symbolism there that people can call in. And I don't consider myself a very intuitive reader. It's not something that I do. But I would assume that most people who do readings, they probably focus in on certain elements of a reading that calls out to them or or draws attention to them, or not draws attention to them, but they draw attention to it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So I wasn't too sure if that was what you had meant.
I don't know.
It could be
What's the word?
I was going to say, well, it could be that just in your current place in life, the swords could be coming up with the same meaning. But kind of like with what Loken said, it kind of depends on if you associate them traditionally with air or with a modern interpretation of fire. I think that's the traditional one anyway. I could be wrong on that. I personally associate the swords with fire because you forge a blade in fire. But you could easily just say that you also need the right amount of air to create the fire and the right amount of water to temper the steel. So steel comes from the earth, so technically it takes all the elements. Yeah. So it really depends on your interpretation of the symbology.
For example, that's a good example, I guess. The Nine of Swords, at least in the Steampunk Tarot, is a card of anxiety, which, to be fair, is supposed to be pretty freaking well. And I seem to draw that card when I first started coming out of my shell and grow with a person. I got that card a lot. And during some of my more painful moments, I drew that card almost every other session. And then I got, okay, my deck started slapping me in the face saying, wake up, or you're gonna keep seeing me. So I symbolized that card with pain, basically. I don't know if that makes much. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I honestly don't know what you just said, Leon. I have a very hard time understanding. Sometimes I don't know if it's
Deborah, can you translate?
You'll have to repeat it for me too, buddy.
I'm sorry. Basically, I interpreted the Nine of Swords as pain because the Nine of Swords in the Golden Tarot is about regret and mostly anxiety.
Okay, I see. Okay, so
I had a lot of that. I had a lot of when I was coming out of my shell as a girl, as a person and such, I drew the Nine of Swords a lot.
Okay, so it sounds like maybe it sounds like maybe there's 2 interpretations of this particular card.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah. I don't think there's only one interpretation of every single card. I think the cards can share. Like if you're going to have a card that represents the 9 of Swords, then it will probably, I'm assuming, will have symbolism which is similar to other cards that come in that category, and chances are they're based in the Rider-Smith Waite 9 of Swords. Now, that doesn't mean that the 9 of Swords is always going to have one interpretation. You know, it can have a different interpretation, again, depending upon what the question is, what the other cards are around it, and also what you generally think about the 9 of Swords. Or maybe it could be like, let's say you've done a reading for somebody in the past. You can definitely, you can see similarities, you can see a pattern, or you can put emphasis, or excuse me, you can place an importance on patterns if you feel like some card has come up before and you feel it sticks out for some reason.
Yeah, I agree. Like the 9 of Swords for me is not necessarily regret, but worry and fear and anticipation of what may come. So, and again, it depends on what you believe and how you read. And like me personally, I don't read reverse cards. So the 9 of Swords popping up for me to read that, I would look more to what's around it, what the situation is, if I'm aware of it, that kind of thing. But if it's reverse and you read reverse cards, it may mean something completely different based on the cards around it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's some people who do place an important, like, yeah, exactly. They'll place an importance on reversed cards, or some people don't.
So, Bora, I also want to ask, this is more of a personal thing. Do you place your cards face down or face up when you read?
So when I draw and I'm reading for me, I always place face up, because it doesn't matter to me if they're face down first, and if I want to flip them one by one and read them as a story, then maybe I would do that. But for me, the reading is a whole. It's not just bits and pieces. Bits and pieces may be alluding to a certain situation, but you also have to look at the whole surrounding reading. Is there a predominance of swords? Is there a predominance of court cards? Is there a predominance of major arcana cards? What's the general message between each of the individual suits? Like, when I do a reading, the way that I do it, I have a very specific format. I do 9 cards for my general readings, 3 on top, 3 in the middle, 3 on bottom. This is not past, present, future, although another person may read it as such. But usually I just flip them one at a time, and be like, this is what this card means, this is what this card means, this is what this card means, and then I'll look at the overall whole picture of them. So that's the way that I do my readings.
I have trouble with this. I have trouble with the Celtic Cross. So, 9
I don't use the Celtic Cross. I don't get that complicated. Well, that's not true either. I'm not someone that's enthralled by Irish mythology, as other people may be. My symbology leans more towards African. So while I wouldn't use the Celtic Cross, I may invent my own spread that looks like an Ankh. So if you're having trouble with a spread, don't use it, and don't start out with huge spreads either. If you're going to be new to learning symbology, you've got to start with baby steps. You got to learn the cards. You've got to learn why spreads are placed a certain way. I got a book, and I'll send you a link later to it. You can pick it up. It's about tarot spreads and stuff.
Also, do you believe in bonds of a certain deck?
There's a lot, just to kind of expand on what Zabora had said. Yeah, there's definitely, there's not just one type of spread. There's all kinds of spreads. And I think some people just use a simple 3-card spread, you know. You can even just do one, you know, just maybe to familiarize yourself with a deck. I've done that. That's how I got familiar with the Rider-Waite Tarot deck. Was I just, over a period of time, I just studied a card at a time every day, and then eventually it just got to the point where then I began to understand the symbolism of the cards and was able to do readings for it, you know. But what was your question?
Do you believe there's a certain bond with the deck, like with mine with the steampunk?
I don't think it's so much with the deck. I think it's more with the images present on the card. You have a liking for a particular image, which is why you're using the deck. So for me, it's not so much a bond with the cards as it is an understanding of the images. So for me, like, I have multiple decks, but I have specific decks that I will use for different situations. I've got my general deck, which I will use on just anybody. I've got my dragon deck that I will use if I want truth in a situation. I've got my Shadowscape deck if I'm dealing with an emotional situation. So it's more of me putting emphasis on what I'm seeing in the cards versus any kind of special relationship that I have with the cards.
And I didn't understand your question, Leon.
He wanted to know about a bond. Is there what my thoughts were about a bonding with a specific deck?
Oh, you were okay. Sorry, I thought that was for both of us.
Well, it could be for you too. You answer it then.
I don't know. I don't feel any bond to any deck. So. No.
My first actual deck was it's a more modern take on the Golden Visconti Symbolism deck. And then I got the traditional Rider-Waite deck. I tried that one for a while. It didn't really click. And then I got, just throwing my Morgan face, I got the Raven deck, which I felt zero link with.
Just out of curiosity, what does Morgan mean? You know?
Wait, you talking about the goddess or the deck?
The goddess.
Well,
I actually don't even know. I was just curious because.
Well, her spheres are war, death, and sovereignty. That's what the ancient Celts saw her as. Saw her as the goddess who claimed you after you died. Mm-hmm. The goddess of war, and as the song says, she fills an empty throne. She's the goddess. Was the goddess of, basically the goddess of kings. She's the goddess of sovereignty, of sovereignty of nations, sovereignty of the home.
I didn't know that she represented sovereignty. That's
what I've read anyway. I know she's a goddess of war and death.
Oh, okay, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt you because you were in the middle of saying something else.
No, it's okay. And that train's gone.
It got derailed.
Laura, help me here.
So, my suggestion to you, Leon, is actually maybe doing what, like Lilokin said, would be to look at the card, study the card, look at the images and the meanings behind it, write it down, write down what those things mean to you, because you having a deeper understanding of a card's symbolism is kind of based upon your experiences. So if I look at the Justice card, that's going to have very specific meanings to me, as well as the card itself, basic meaning. So that would be my suggestion, would be getting a composition notebook, writing down 0, the Fool, write down what the basic symbology is of like a dude not looking where he's going over a cliff, being held back by a dog or cat or whatever it is, and then write down what the meaning is and then what that means to you, because your understanding from this is going to come from, like I said, your own experiences.
That'd be a good idea, because I am kind of tied to the book. Oh, I have the book written next to me whenever I do a reading.
That's fine, but if you really want to learn the cards and a way for you to interpret them, and you don't want to just rely on the book for whatever reason, not that I see a problem with having a book, then that would be my suggestion. That's how I learned my Anubis Oracle. That's how I half learned my tarot decks.
Yeah. And also kind of getting a little bit putting the tarot symbolism and getting back to just symbolism period off to the side. The reason why I asked you about the Morrigan is because it's, you know, I mean, I know that people share videos and people get interest and they hear about different deities from different cultures, and certain times it appeals to them, and that's all well and good. But I think it especially when it comes to gods and goddesses, I think it's something that should definitely appeal to you. I'm very much for the individual finding their own way and their own path and their own understanding to things. And it's kind of, you know, the Morrigan it herself has a lot of symbolism and a lot of story that comes from mythology, comes from the representation, comes from her. And then other people put their own interpretation of that onto it and then use that iconography for themselves. Sometimes that iconography can be accurate, and sometimes it can be, again, what they're putting into it. So I think it doesn't do me any good to say, interpret the symbolism of Taranis or Taranis, however you want to call that particular god, who usually is holding like a club and then holding a wheel, and people can interpret that symbolism various different ways. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly, at least to the best of my knowledge, and if anybody has the information, they can correct me, but I don't know if anybody actually knows what that's the specific symbols actually meant. We can put our own interpretation onto it. So, you know, I really enjoy hearing people talking about their experience with the Morrigan or with another deity or something, but I always wonder if they don't know what her name means and what mythology she's a part of and what story she comes up in and how she acts. And, you know, it's kind of like, do you enjoy the idea or the concept of it, or do you actually enjoy what that goddess actually represents in the consciousness of the people who also maybe revere her or understand her? You know, it's a question that I put forward, and I don't know if necessarily my interpretation is correct, but that's how I view it.
That's actually a really good point, you know, because I tend to get a little up in arms when people misattribute certain aspects to Egyptian deities. It's like, well, I can tell that you're coming from a lack of understanding here. Let me enlighten you. But it usually comes at the form of, you're just trying to persecute me.
But in a story called let me, if I can pronounce it in Gaelic, the Toyn Boculi, and I'm probably mispronouncing that because I'm not trained in the Irish language, but the Toyn Boculi is a story about Cuchulainn and his defense, especially in Northern Ireland or the Ulster part of Ireland, and the Morrigan, the Great Queen, is one of the deities that he encounters during this whole escapade, where he basically fights one-on-one with the entire army coming at him, and he fights each individual one-on-one, because that was how warriors fought back then. They fought one-on-one. One of the reasons why they lost to the Romans so many times, but that's something else entirely. But the whole story of the Toynbee Cooley, you see the Morrigan, you see the symbolism, you see it, you can hear it, you can, it's tangible. So it's I always suggest, if you really want to find out about a particular god, goddess, research, find out about them, and study in mythology. For me, it was a way for me to kind of have a better understanding of the particular gods and goddesses that I encountered in these stories, in these myths and legends. I don't know if it's something that appeals to you, or was there something, what drew you towards that particular goddess at that time?
I told Sabora this when we had our talk. It was after the death of my dad. I think what she described it as, I released a ton of emotions at once, and that called her, and that motion that I guess jumped towards the death of my dad. I guess she picked up the phone, I guess you could say, and I didn't even, honestly, Sephora, low up, and I had no idea. I was just into the universe. I guess she picked up the phone, I suppose, and I didn't know when she came. I was freaked the fuck out, honestly. And I guess after that, I don't know. What do you think? Was it much of a call? More was a mass mental dump out into the universe, basically?
Well, a UPG, is a great place to start, but Lilokin, from my understanding of the conversation anyway, was asking more about, are you interested in learning, like, her origins and the culture that she comes from and the emphasis that they put on her? Or are you more interested in just the experiences that you are having with her? I could be wrong on what I was distracted. I could be wrong. I'm going to shut up now.
I am being honest. I have no idea. I guess it may have just been a one-off thing. I just needed a way to just unleash, I suppose, a healthy way to vent all of my frustration, depression, and anger all at once. And I guess that was the result of it. It's more of a surprised, amazed, I suppose, that happened. Am I looking to replicate it? Honestly, no. Because that honestly scared the shit out of me. But if that's if I'm interested in her mythology, I suppose I am. Or if you can link me a website or something like that, where I can read up on it, I'll be happy to read it.
So I'm not the one to go to for the Morgana. My expertise lies in African traditions, specifically Egyptian. If you want Celtic, you're going to have to go to Lilokin.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I'm a source either. I mean, there's a lot of information out there. I mean, there's some good writers. I mean, you could probably do a simple Google search on her, and the way that I look at, when I was exploring paganism and I was looking into gods of the pre-Christian cultures that I was interested in, I wanted to find out exactly who and what they are, what they're interpreted, and how the people associated them. And I wanted to understand the history of them, and I also wanted to understand their symbolism. And that's what I did. The various Irish deities, the various Gallic deities that I was interested, that's what I did. And I feel for myself that was a way for me to connect with them, because then I understood what various symbolisms meant to those particular deities, and what those things meant. Like if you see a cauldron with the Indagada, it's completely different than, say, seeing a cauldron with Caradwen. Those are two different things, even though those are similar iconography with those particular deities. With the Indagada, it can almost take like a comedic aspect, definitely related to food and having fun and enjoying life and kind of going to excess, and it can mean that, and beer and drinking and revelry and all that. Whereas for Caradwen, it definitely is transformation and magic and traveling and metaphysics, and it has a completely different meaning, even though that same image is seen with different deities, because the deity shapes the symbols with them, if that makes sense. So that's what I would suggest if you're really interested in, and yeah, talk with people who are familiar with maybe the goddess, but also look into the cold facts about a particular deity, and then look at the mythology and the legends about it. And I think that helps to build a realistic image of a particular deity. I don't know what you think about that.
I actually would kind of agree with your premise there, Lilo, because I did a similar thing when I first started exploring magic. It started out with Wicca and European tradition, and then it turned to ceremonial magic, and then it went to, oh my God, ceremonial magic goes back to Christians and the Kabbalah and stuff. But what came before that? And then it turned into a love of history, and it's like when I found the Egyptian gods again, it's like, oh my God, these animal-headed deities, I must learn everything. So again, my path is kind of comes back to my love of animals.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a very important symbol. Animals are very important symbols in my understanding of the Egyptian pantheon.
Yeah. And I was kind of alluding to this earlier, and obviously I know I can be very judgmental and kind of stuck in my ways, but people on YouTube, and I'm not saying that you're in that category, Leon, so please forgive me if you interpret it that way, but I feel that some people on YouTube, they kind of, it's like the deity of the day. It's the thing of the day, like people were talking about shadow work. Shadow work was the thing of the day. And then there's the Morrigan. Okay, so that's the goddess of the day. And it's just kind of like, I felt like it just sort of like people adopted it because other people had adopted it. I don't really feel like they actually felt a connection with those things. It's just that it was what other people were talking about, and it's kind of nice. It's nice to, have a topic of discussion, but it's not, there should be more than just maybe peer pressure to get interested in something, especially something like, looking at deities, or, doing self-reflection. If you're doing self-reflection, that's, that's some serious stuff. It's not something you just kind of do at a whim. It's, if you're going to be serious about it, it's something that's probably going to take your entire life. Something you're probably going to have to dedicate time to, definitely dedicate energy to, and it's not something you do in, you know, a week, a month, a year. Who knows? You know, I'm definitely not a perfect person, and I'm still working on a lot of shit. You know, it's just a process for me, and I'm always trying to catch myself, and you know, yeah, it's a process.
Like I told before in our talk, while the Morgan experience was interesting, certainly a wake-up call for me, I'm still exploring mythology. Like I said, I the first mythology book I ever read, or in the Bible, nudge, was the Odyssey, and I listened to the Iliad on Audible. I listened to Norse mythology by Neil Goldman on Audible, and maybe if I could find a book that's credible, support would help me on this, I might read the Egyptian mythology next.
Well, it's like kind of like I told you before. The Greeks, I studied them before I studied any of the other Western occult type pantheons, and I found the Greek gods to be very human. So I don't believe that would be like a good moral compass to throw energy into. Not again, not that Zeus can't be a good dude. He most certainly can be a good dude, but he's also a prolific rapist. So
why do people focus on that so much? Why is it so important to spread that Zeus is a rapist? It's mythology. It's legend.
Right, and that's kind of my point.
Why do people focus on that? I don't understand that.
Well, it's not just that. It's also.
It is just that. That's all I hear from you about Zeus. That's all I've heard about others. Usually it's women. Usually women always say this about Zeus. It's like, why? I don't understand. What exactly is this about Zeus that is so horrible? Is it because he has mythology about having multiple wives? Yeah, okay.
Zeus cheating on his wife, Hera,
legend. Okay.
tends to spawn a lot of mythology that the Greeks have, such as Hercules and all the other children that he had. But most of the time it was through forced copulation.
I was going to say.
Yeah, see, that's in the mythologies that I've read. I don't see it that way. I see him as being very virile and having multiple wives. But I don't.
I've only ever heard of the one wife Hera, which is why she's always pissed off and punishing his children.
Mm-hmm.
I found the Norse gods as well very human.
The which one?
The Norse pantheon.
Yes.
I mean, they die at the end. Of course, it is supposed to be a cycle of they die and are reborn in their next incarnations after Ragnarok.
Right. Yeah.
So,
well, of course, we're going to find human elements in deities. We created them, and we base them off of what we as humans do. Set, the brother of Osiris, he's a murderer, and he is still an important figure in Egyptian mythology. I may not honor him as a murderer, but I may call upon that type of energy to invoke protection. And that was, again, my point. The Greek gods were just a little too immoral, and it's not just Zeus. Poseidon was a dirty little bastard too. Athena's done some fucked up shit of her own. So it's of course we're going to find human elements in the deities.
I'm going to have to find in mythology where he I have to look at that mythology again.
He became a swan and impregnated a lady.
Yeah, but he's also was coming into a town as a beggar, and an old couple are the only ones that took pity on him and gave him the food off of their table and gave them the straw off of their bed so that he could find a nice place to sleep. And they said, "You're more than welcome to stay with us till morning." And in the morning, he revealed that he was this all-powerful deity Zeus, and says, "You are the only ones that were ever kind to me. What can I give you as a gift?" So again, he's not just this asshole, because was it George R. R. Martin who said, like, the only thing that's really worth writing about is conflict within the human heart? And I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah, but okay, I see. So this is what I was harping on earlier, was that, yeah, I understand the mythology of Zeus, and a lot of the gods, it's all mythology, it's all story, and yeah, a lot of it is not all that. A lot of it is kind of bloody, and it's not always PG. But what I'm saying is that Zeus did so many things, but I'm trying to find exactly where he was running around raping everybody. That's what I'm trying to figure out, because that's my understanding of the Zeus mythology is not that. I understand that he went into human form and copulated with humans, but
He was also a swan who raped a woman. He raped a woman in swan form, I think.
yeah, but what? Yeah, exactly. But I'm trying to figure out which story says that.
Right. I can't remember even the woman that he copulated with, but again, it's not just Zeus. Athena was a goddess that I originally worked with, and then I found out more about her. I'm like, this chick is just a jealous bitch. If you look at the story of
The Minotaur.
Arachne, or Arachnid, or whatever, she was.
Yes, I know the story.
Yeah, she was a weaver that was so good at her craft, she was actually better than a goddess. But the town couldn't say that. But Athena herself recognized it, but as punishment, she still turned the chick into a spider. So I understand the mythology of it, but she was still a cunt in the entire story. At least to my standard.
I think it was either Athena or Poseidon that turned King Midas Poseidon into a Minotaur. That's one of the stories I remember.
Oh, it's been a long time, and I was a teenager, like young teenager, probably the last time I looked into mythology.
One story that fucked me up the most was Medusa was raised in Athena's temple, and in punishment, Athena turned her into a Gorgon.
Yeah, because she couldn't very well punish Poseidon. It's another god, and it could be reflection of Greek society, and a lot of mythology is. In general, it's a reflection of what the people do. My husband's people, they had mythology about a spider god who showed them how to allow women to have natural births. That doesn't mean that a spider actually came to human form and showed the Palauan people how to give birth to babies, but it's a reflection of their culture and their understanding. So,
what people again?
My husband is a Palauan. He's a Pacific Islander. So that's one of the mythologies of his people. They also have mythology about the world being created in a clam, because they have giant clams where he's from. They have mythology about the islands coming into being because it was actually a giant who was eating all the food, so they killed him, and his body became the Rock Islands in Palau. So again, it's all mythology based on their own cultural understanding. So Athena attacking, not attacking Poseidon, but attacking Medusa is just a product of Greek society and Greek understanding.
Yeah. So I'm just kind of concerned with let's say continuing the mythology down the line for further generations, because my understanding of Greek mythology was that Zeus was virile and he was out and he had multiple wives and had these various sexual encounters. It seems like lately, I don't know, it just seems that way, that it's like there's this negative association with him because he, quote unquote, raped women. So that's where I'm trying to figure out exactly, what is. I know it's a myth. I know it's a myth, and I know it's a legend, but it does have ramifications. It does have. Well, I don't. It's a pretty bold statement to say it has ramifications onto us, but in a sense, it does, because if we are going to misrepresent mythology, misrepresent deities, and I don't know, and I'm not accusing anyone of doing that, but I'm concerned about where exactly this shift happened, where people started interpreting this mythology this way rather than another way. So I have to look into it, because yeah, the gods are humans, and they fall to human frailty and human problems, but we don't need to project anything more onto it than is already there. And also, we're looking through it through the lens of the 21st century.
Right, of course. And like I told you, I've never heard that Zeus had more than one wife. So everything that I've read in school and in mythology books, Zeus only had one wife, but he had multiple partners, willing or not.
Yeah, I think you're right.
That's what I've always heard.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I misspoke. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, it's not that he had multiple wives; he had multiple lovers.
Right. And it could, again, like you said, being colored by a 21st century woman living in America, my understanding of it would have been vastly different than a Greek person's understanding 2,000 years ago.
If I may interject for a second, that story of Zeus and the couple in that who get him shelter, to me, it kind of echoes, what was it, Job? Was it Job? In Sodom and Gomorrah? Of the entire city, only he gave shelter to these divine beings. And it says, only you and your family will be saved from destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. To me, it feels kind of like an echo of that. That's just my interpretation anyway.
Well, we have like a million different stories about the same legend, so and different perspectives about the same legend. Homer, when he was writing the Iliad and the Odyssey, that had probably gone through 50 different renderings, and depending on who told the story, had 50 more different added scenes to it. So it's really about context and doing your digging and trying to find the original documents, and that's with anything. When you look at even like the Bible and you're trying to figure out what hell is, and you look up every translation of hell, most of them are for Sheol, and then you're like, what the fuck is a Sheol? So it comes down to really digging through history and trying to find the original stories.
Speaking of that, I found on Audible a translation, but a more modern translation of the Flood of Gilgamesh. I might give that a listen to. For the Epic of Gilgamesh.
The Epic of Gilgamesh? Yeah.
I might give that a listen to.
The Epic of Gilgamesh is like the first myth I think that we have recorded. If I'm not mistaken, it's like the oldest myth recorded, or something like that. And you see a lot of, because of the area that it's come from, a lot of other myths were inspired by the Epic of Gilgamesh, including the myths of Moses and Jesus and stuff. Or am I
definitely can't.
confusing Gilgamesh with Hammurabi?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't know what was the. Yeah, I'm not that familiar with mythology. I know that the Code of Hammurabi contributed to the laws. I know that various myths have similarities to Christian mythology.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if Jesus, or excuse me, Moses being in the basket. I couldn't remember if that was Hammurabi or if that was the Epic of Gilgamesh.
I don't know. That's a good question. I know that it's. I think it goes back to Gilgamesh. Maybe. I don't. I'm not that familiar with it. Maybe somebody in the chat knows.
Yeah, I'm kind of still more of a novice when it comes to the Christian and the Jewish mythology. I'm learning.
Yeah.
Forgive me.
Yeah.
Lilo, you said one time that, or someone might have said that ceremonial magic requires or uses the ancient Jewish text or script.
It is used in the ceremonial magic, but I'm not sure if it is a requirement. It's more of that was what was traditionally used was Hebrew text because the origins of ceremonial magic come from Jewish and Christian traditions.
Well, in a lot of ceremonial magic, they will use the Hebrew characters. They'll use Hebrew characters to draw. To form a magic circle. They'll use it to consecrate items. They'll also use it for numerology. They'll use it for, there was also a belief, that there was like a Bible code. So there's also a different way you can interpret the stories if you translate them back into Hebrew and you do it numerologically. So that's what I meant by using Hebrew script. They usually use the letters, and then obviously, if you do actually end up joining a ceremonial magic group, chances are that you'll learn various Hebrew words and how to pronounce them, and also how to write them, because there's a special way to write them. You have to write it from right to left, and also you don't put the vowels in, you just put the consonants in, and it's something you have to study. At least in my opinion, if you really want to get into ceremonial magic, it's something you're probably gonna pick up. I don't put that much emphasis into it. It's not part of my practice. Some people think that that's missing a huge portion of it, and it really depends upon how you look at it, I guess.
So, look, I've got a question for you. This may cross into like trade secrets, so just tell me to shut up. Well, oath-bound secrets or whatever. But when the style of Wicca, is it not ceremonial magic? Because I thought the whole point of ceremonial magic, when it was like every action has a meaning behind it, and that's kind of the way I've always interpreted Wiccan type castings.
Well, when I'm talking about ceremonial magic, I'm talking about you're using the grimoire, you're using the Abramelin format, or you're using the Key of Solomon format, or you're using a Golden Dawn system, or you're using a Kabbalistic system. That's what I consider to be ceremonial magic, where there's more involved in it. Chances are you've made all of your own instruments, you've made your altar, you've drawn out your circle, and there's a whole ritual that you do for the things, for whatever it is you're going to do. Whereas in Wicca, they have a set format, or at least I should say that the forms that I practice, you have a format, but it's not the same as ceremonial magic. You can definitely see parallels like the circle is a very good example. The circle that most Wiccan groups create is essentially similar to the ceremonial magician's circle, with slight differences. I think the ceremonial concept of a magic circle was to keep the forces out, to sort of protect the magician once they call up these spirits from the netherworld and consult them or use them or instruct them to do something, as opposed to a witch's circle or a Wiccan circle, where it becomes, yes, a protective barrier, but it also becomes a place that's between the worlds. You know, I did a video on this. It also designates a sacred area, you know, so it's similar, but it's a little different. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like it's similar to like the word witch being specifically European, but my interpretation is a little broader than that. So the words or the act of ceremonial magic is specific, but it's also broader to me. My own interpretations, anyway.
Yeah, but can you expand on that? What do you mean?
Sure. Like what I would do, I would consider ceremonial in nature, because I have my own tools that I've created. I had specific rituals that I had to do with my statues in order to consecrate them. I have specific cleansing rituals that happen before anything happens in the temple. I have a specific way that a specific format, like you said, that I go through in my working. So that would all be ceremonial to me, because each of those actions holds a specific meaning in my own working. But I kind of get where you're saying that the history and original meanings of it come from Kabbalah and the Key of Solomon and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, anybody can do a ceremony. Like, you go to church, it's a ceremony, it's a ritual, you know. I was trying to I was sort of cobbling that word into representing, you know, people who call themselves a magician. They do ceremonial magic. That's what they do. They're, you know, some people call them ceremonial magician. Maybe other people have different terms for it. But yeah, you go into other cultures and yes, they do ceremonies for things. Like you do a ceremony for what it is that you do, but I don't. But when I was talking about ceremonial magic, I was actually talking about a specific a
different format than what you use.
Yeah, I was using it like, yes, like if you look at, like, let's say an elevation ceremony in the Golden Dawn, you know, there's a whole ceremony in that I would call that ceremonial magic. That's what I would call ceremonial magic. But yeah, you know, other cultures use magic in a ceremony, but I'm of the school, and I think you already know this, Sabora, that when I speak of witchcraft and I'm using the European word witchcraft, I understand that there's other cultures that practice magic. I completely understand that, but I respect those cultures enough to use it by its proper term. For example, like you refer to, you know, like if you're talking about voodoo, then you use that term voodoo. If you're talking about Santeria, you use that term Santeria. If you're talking about a bruja, you're using that term. If you're, you know, you're using the term for the culture, for the practice that they practice. Even though, yes, you could simply just say that, you know, all these groups essentially practice magic or witchcraft. But if I'm going to be talking about a specific group, I'll use that word that's associated with their culture.
Right. No, I understand. And it's just like I told you. It's just because I'm an English speaker, I use English words when I describe my practice. So the word witch is literally bruja, hoodoo doctor. Those mean the same thing to me because it's the practitioner of the magic. So I just wanted to kind of get the clarification on ceremonial magic because my own understanding is different.
how would you describe it?
Well,
How
it's
would
just
you
like,
describe those people who I call practicing ceremonial magic? What would you call them?
oh no, I agree that that is ceremonial magic, but I would also attribute that to different practices that use rituals and ceremonies and set things. It's um that's just kind of what I'm getting at.
Hmm.
I guess it's because of like, how would you describe God? It Aaron Ross says that it's a magical anthropomorphic being
Animal.
that transcends time and space and is sometimes omnipotent and sometimes omnipresent. Not necessarily, but those are the things that all gods have in common. Um, so I guess I'm kind of looking at more of a broader term, like, oh, well, this ritual holds specific ceremonial aspects, therefore it's ceremonial magic, but it's more of a broad term and not dealing with specifics like you were.
So what would you call, like, if, like, let's say somebody performed the Abramelin, or they performed a ritual that had the Key of Solomon, or they performed a Golden Dawn act. What would you call those practices?
Rituals, I would guess, or like you said, ceremonial magic, but it's I would say that they would be magicians, as most people who practice that type of magic identify as a magician.
Mhm.
So that's how I would identify that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, it,
Well, down to whatever emphasis I put on the symbols.
yeah. I mean, for myself, it's, it's, I have terms that may be outdated, for me, because these were the terms that I was using 30 years ago. These were terms that I was just using. This was how we kind of distinguished ourselves. And, from when I was getting into witchcraft and paganism and learning about this stuff, there weren't so many various groups. We heard about various groups, but there was like a druid group, and there was a ceremonial magicians group, and there was a witches group. And are we boring you, Leon? And
No.
okay. And, then you had people who practiced various paganisms, and then there was various cultures of paganism, and there was voodoo and Santeria. And, it's just nowadays there's just there's a lot more stuff that people are talking about. And I noticed that the language that I'm used to, other people may not use the same language, or maybe they use different terms or whatever. So that's why I just want to make sure that when I'm saying a term that people understand what I'm referring to. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, if I'm going to be talking about a mountain, I want people to understand what a mountain is. I don't want them thinking I'm talking about trees, because I'm not talking about trees. I'm talking about mountains. That's why I'm using the word mountain, if that makes sense.
No, and I don't think it's an outdated language that you're using. You're using very traditional terms that started the movement.
Mm.
So I think it's important that we discuss these kinds of things, just because it showcases the history, which I'm a huge buff. I'm a huge history buff. So for me, it's important to talk about this. It's like, well, what does this mean to you, and what does this mean to you? What do you put emphasis on this word? Because it preserves tradition,
Mhm.
and I'm very much pro tradition in some regards.
Yeah, it's just, we'll figure out some way to get it back onto the topic of symbolism.
Well, it is symbolism, because
Yeah.
the when I think of ceremonial magic, I think of a dude casting a circle with a wand.
Mhm.
It may not necessarily be me with a sistrum banishing a pep, but I would still define what I would do as what I do as ceremonial in nature, even though it's not specifically related to Abramelin or the Key of Solomon or the Order of the Golden Dawn.
Mhm. Yeah, so I don't know what would be yeah, because yeah, I see what you're saying, because they can all be ceremonial. Yeah, I can definitely see that. And bringing it back to the symbolism, yeah, there's like, if you have, you can look at writing, you can look at symbols in the occult, you can see various things, and if you understand this, what built that symbol or what that symbol represents, you can understand what those various things mean, as opposed to, like, let's say, if you see, you know, some other, I don't know where I'm going with this. I completely lost my train of thought, but I was essentially just saying that there's symbols that definitely each practice uses, which are unique to those practices. And like, for myself, I don't use symbols from other practices that I'm not trained in and not associated with, because I feel it would be, it's not my place to use them, and it's not like I'm trying to appropriate them or anything. It's just for me, that particular symbol is inert and impotent, you know, and that symbol is definitely not impotent and inert for the people who use that image and that symbolism, if that makes sense.
Right, you're not putting any power into the symbology because you have no connection to the culture.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, essentially, yeah, and you don't even necessarily have to be part of that culture. You could be trained in it, you know.
To understand, yeah, you don't have any understanding of that culture.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's the important part, you know. And I think that kind of maybe sort of defines what is, you know, cultural, quote unquote, cultural appropriation, and what's not cultural appropriation. Is you understand it and you're respectful of it and you treat it that way. You don't just sort of, you know, slap it in there almost like an afterthought, you know.
Right, and that's kind of I would agree with that. That's the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation.
Yeah, exactly.
But I still think it's important to discuss, you know, openly what certain symbols mean. Because if you present me with an image of the pentacle, and I'd be like, oh, that's an association of the night sky, and you're like, no. This is an association of protection. You know, we both have different views on it, but I could be like, oh, okay, I could see how that could be protection in an Egyptian sense because it's linked to the goddess Nut, and Nut being the sky mother, Nut swallows Ra and protects him on his way to the underworld. So I could then understand and put my own emphasis through my own understanding into that symbol.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because you have a different association. You have your own what that symbol means to you. Yeah. So, all right. Well, it's already 9 o'clock. So, I think we actually did pretty well today. I think we pretty much stayed on topic throughout the whole hangout, which is different.
Yeah, well, like you said, some symbols and stuff. That's such a broad topic that it all comes down to really anything could be a symbol. It's just whatever emphasis you put on it.
Yeah, exactly. It has to have some kind of a context. Otherwise, it's just an image, you know. So, but yeah.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lila and Sabora.
Yeah, and then hopefully, again, like anybody who's in the chat, you know, as long as you're respectful, you're always welcome to join. But again, I have to know you through Twitter or Facebook to send you the link. But don't feel like you're not welcome. even if this is your first time in my chat, you are welcome. But I just have to be able to send you the link so that when you do come on, that I know that you're not going to be doing something stupid. So, but thanks for hanging out with me, Leon, and Zahora.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to say, if it's got to bring like me can be invited on and hold a conversation, anyone can.
Yeah, definitely.
I need to work on that, honestly.
Yeah. All right, Leon. Have a good night, and everybody in chat, have a good night.
You too.